Hello, we're continuing to read. It Was All a Dream, Reniqua Allen. And this is why I never believed in dreams, the American dream, or any other dream. I mean, I believe in my dreams that I have when I'm sleeping. That's a different thing. Even that, I have to study, excuse me. But as far as social dreams and things like that, I don't need that. Neither do you. If you have a talent and you have a skill, you should be able to use it. And you should be able to master it and produce with it and even feed yourself with it. All my shirts are getting big. Got to do something about that. Poverty will make you lose weight. It's okay. Mrs. V's satisfaction, though, is not only about the whip. As a dominatrix, she also demands that her clients read essays from feminist literature, particularly those from Patricia Hill Collins, and makes her slaves write essays about them. Ms. V knows that her methods may be untraditional, but she thinks that in some small way, she can help white folk understand more about the black experience in America. She said the essays they write aren't great and they often complain, but she hopes that she can get through to them, even if it's just a little bit. For example, she helps them understand the intersections between race and class. Every new person almost every time says you're not ratchet, or I've seen other black doms, but they're all ghetto. It makes her double down even harder. When I make them do theoretical work, we talk about valuing all black women across classes. They're not going to only like me because I'm going to get my PhD and talk shit about a Southside dom that they met that maybe doesn't speak the way I speak, she said with a sigh. I don't know if it really sticks, but I fucking drill that into them and will beat them for it. Punish them for it. Her lessons have helped at least one of her clients see black women in a different light. He told her he started a foundation for single black homeless women because of their sessions and his work with her. She was blown away. See, this is not something that you can really depend on. We need some social, institutional, and systemic actions. Ms. V wrestles with the fact that most of her clients are white men. She identifies as queer and is in a lot of black queer spaces where everyone is super cute, super lit, and it's all just great. But she remains unsure what people in the Ghanaian or African American community think of her. She's attracted to non-cis white men, but in the past she's had to try to figure out how to navigate that. I've slept with a lot of people, and I'm such a hoe. I love it, but I have not been with a lot of black people. That's something I still struggle with. She seems to think hard about her next words. I think partly it's that I was around a lot more white people. I think partly it's that I had a lot more internalized things. Then maybe the way that I feel valued in sexual or romantic relationships exists in a certain way that is a specific thing about whiteness. She faces other pressures as a black queer woman in these spaces. There is pressure to be hyper-feminine in ways that she believes white doms don't have to be. They have more space to be more creative. Ms. V tries to push back and reject those restrictive labels, letting her true self come through, which means sometimes she wears combat boots and sometimes she wears heels, but she hates the notion that she has to constantly reify her femininity. White doms can be super femme or hard femme, which is more in line with her persona, but she can't always do that. She is already losing people because of racism. Ms. V has no qualms saying that she believes that her clients in general are racist. As she said, that's why they're looking for a black dom. She knows she's being fetishized and exoticized, often by people who have never been intimate with a black woman. She tries to work with it and be understanding, but sometimes people take it too far. Like last week when someone messaged her and said they wanted to be domed or controlled by an N-word bitch ape. She realized they weren't necessarily calling her an ape, but she found the language problematic, and even more so because they thought she would be okay with that language. Fuck you, she wrote back and blocked them. There's only so much she can do, she said with another sigh. She worries about repercussions and violence when it comes to dealing with certain clients. And though she has been fairly lucky when it comes to violence, though not immune to it, she still has her concerns. Her voice lowered as she told me a story about a new client she met the week before our meeting. His previous black dom had died 10 years ago and he was finally looking for a new person. But Miss V, in the interim, said he had lost some of his training. He wouldn't follow her commands. She'd tell him to get on his knees and he'd boldly say, "No, I don't want to." He made excuses over and over for 40 minutes and refused to submit to her until she, annoyed, finally ended the session for the lack of his obedience. He was upset, and the look he gave her put fear in her eyes. Sensing a bad vibe and feeling that something was about to happen, she texted her husband, who was nearby at a coffee shop. She thought he was going to take the money he left on the table, and at that point she didn't care. He wasn't getting what he paid $700 for. She was scared, and she realized that if he wanted to, he could hit her right there. He left without any incident, but Ms. V was shaken. It was a reminder of how unsafe the work is. And the work is unsafe, according to a report by the Sex Workers Outreach Project USA, a sex worker advocacy group of over 40 million sex workers around the world. 45 to 75% have a chance of encountering sexual violence in their careers, and 32 to 55% are likely to experience violence any given year. In the United States, over 30% of street-based workers in Miami said they had violent encounters with a client in the past 90 days. In New York, over 80% of street-based workers said they had experienced violence. New York is rough. The number for indoor sex workers aren't much better. In New York, 46% said they were forced to do something they didn't want to do. Accurate data is hard to come by because of the underground nature of the industry, a lack of peer review, and author bias, according to one former sex worker. If you look at the rates for trans workers, especially black trans workers, the amount of violence is even more frightening. In the trans community, where work is already hard to come by because of the harsh stigma they face, sex work is often the only option that people can turn to for cash. In 2015, 10 of the reported 12 trans sex workers who died were black, according to the National LGBTQ Task Force, though data on this is shaky and the likelihood of accurate reporting of these cases is low. In all likelihood, the numbers are even higher, as the federal government doesn't collect homicide data because of gender. Additionally, police departments may misgender victims based on their birth names. So, first of all, we need a society where you're not so strapped for cash that you have to do this, and if you do sex work, it's because you want to do it. Second of all, the issues that she has, man. The issues. It's a lot of insanity. And the problem with having to go to white institutions, in other words, to get work, education, and everything else, is then what you're doing by doing that is admitting that you can't control anything, like that they are better in a higher position, and that's not necessarily true. That's why I keep telling black people, okay, we have to have our own businesses. I do that, but you need your own institutions of learning, and you need your own institutions. You need healthcare institutions and organizations. We need it all across the board. We need policing institutions and organizations. I'm not talking about black police officer unions and all. I'm talking about community-based patrolling and policing organizations. And I would even go so far as to say something like a court where you can mediate out disputes until we get to a point where race is not an issue. I don't know when that will be though. So anyway, hit the links below. I need your support. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and please try to be safe.